The exact moment I realized how much respect my daughter-in-law thought I deserved came on a warm Saturday afternoon, standing beside a table covered with homemade desserts. The backyard of my house buzzed with cheerful conversations as neighbors laughed beneath strings of white lights. Music drifted softly through the air while burgers sizzled on the grill. I had spent the entire morning preparing for the celebration. I bought the food, hired a local caterer, arranged every chair, and even paid for the elegant tray of vanilla cupcakes that sat in the center of the dessert table. The party honored my daughter-in-law, Olivia Carter, who had recently earned a promotion at the advertising company where she worked. My son, Ryan Collins, proudly greeted guests while Olivia accepted endless congratulations as if she were hosting the event herself. I was happy for them, or at least I wanted to be. After hours of cooking and serving drinks, my legs felt heavy. I walked toward the dessert table, smiling to myself. A cupcake sounded like the perfect reward after working since sunrise. I reached toward the tray. Before my fingers touched the frosting, Olivia grabbed my wrist. Her grip wasn't painful. It was insulting. She pushed my hand away with a smile that never reached her eyes. "Those cupcakes are only for successful people," she whispered. The words were quiet enough that nearby guests couldn't hear them. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. None came. Instead, she folded her arms and smirked, as though she'd delivered the funniest joke in the world. I turned toward Ryan. He stood only a few feet away holding a bottle of beer. For one hopeful second, I expected my son to defend me. Instead, he laughed, not loudly, just enough to let me know he agreed. Then he lifted his bottle, took another sip, and looked somewhere else. That hurt more than Olivia's words ever could. I didn't argue. I didn't embarrass anyone. I simply nodded, withdrew my hand, and quietly walked back into the house. As soon as the sliding glass door closed behind me, the music became muffled. The silence inside felt strangely comforting. I stood in the kitchen for several minutes, staring at the sink full of dishes I would probably be expected to wash after everyone left. Then something inside me changed, not dramatically, not angrily. It simply stopped. For 3 years, I had convinced myself things would improve. 3 years of excuses, 3 years of giving, 3 years of shrinking my own life so Ryan and Olivia could build theirs. I owned the house my late husband, Daniel, and I had worked nearly 35 years to pay off every penny of the mortgage. When Ryan married Olivia, they struggled with expensive rent. I happily offered them the master bedroom. I moved into the tiny guest room because I believed it was temporary. It'll only be until they save enough for a house. I had told my friends. 3 years later, nothing had changed, except me. Olivia redecorated nearly every room. Daniel's favorite leather recliner disappeared because it didn't match her style. She converted my garage into her private workout room. Ryan stopped helping with yard work because he claimed his office job left him exhausted. I paid every utility bill, water, electricity, internet, streaming subscriptions, property taxes, even groceries. They called it sharing expenses. I called it paying for adults who earned far more than they admitted. Still, I kept telling myself they were family. Family helps each other. Didn't they? That afternoon, standing alone in my kitchen, I realized something painful. Helping someone and being used by someone were two completely different things. I walked upstairs without making a sound. Inside the guest room, I pulled a small overnight bag from the closet. I packed 2 outfits, my medications, my laptop, a toothbrush, nothing more. There was no need for a dramatic exit, no emotional speech, no slammed doors. I carried the bag through the front entrance, climbed into my car, and drove away while everyone outside continued celebrating a promotion I had helped finance in more ways than anyone realized. 40 minutes later, I checked into a quiet roadside motel in the next county. The room was simple. Clean sheets, a small desk, a window overlooking an empty parking lot. For the first time in years, no footsteps echoed above my head. Nobody shouted my name from another room. Nobody asked where dinner was. I ordered a sandwich from the diner next door, took a long hot shower, and sat on the edge of the bed, listening to absolute silence. It felt wonderful. At exactly 10:57 that night, my phone lit up, then again, and again. When I finally looked at the screen, I counted 53 missed calls. Most came from Ryan. The text messages weren't about me. They weren't asking if I was safe. They weren't asking whether I had been hurt. Instead, the first message read, "Mom, where are you?" Everyone left. "The kitchen's a disaster, and Olivia says the trash still needs to go out. Please come home." I slowly placed the phone face down on the nightstand, for the first time in years. I chose not to answer. The next morning, I woke before sunrise without hearing Olivia's alarm blaring through the hallway or Ryan stomping downstairs looking for coffee. The quiet felt unfamiliar. For years, my mornings had belonged to everyone except me. I showered, dressed comfortably, and walked to a small cafe across the street from the motel. The waitress greeted me with a warm smile and poured fresh coffee without rushing me. I ordered pancakes, something I hadn't enjoyed in months because Saturdays at home usually meant cooking breakfast for half the family. As I sat by the window, I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd eaten a meal without someone asking me for something. It was strangely peaceful. After breakfast, I opened my laptop and signed into my online banking accounts. Every monthly payment I covered appeared neatly on the screen: electricity, water, internet, streaming services, the joint grocery credit card, insurance policies. Automatic payments I'd set up years ago because Ryan insisted it was easier if everything came from my account. I stared at the numbers for several minutes, not because I couldn't afford them, because I finally understood I no longer wanted to. My fingers hovered over the keyboard before clicking the grocery card account. Within seconds, I locked the card and requested its cancellation. Next came the internet account. I didn't disconnect the service completely. Instead, I downgraded it to the slowest residential package available, effective Monday morning. If Ryan and Olivia wanted premium speed for work and entertainment, they could open their own account. Finally, I removed automatic payments for several streaming subscriptions neither of them had ever bothered to thank me for providing. When I finished, I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair. For the first time in years, every decision I had made benefited me instead of someone else. Monday morning arrived with bright sunshine. I was enjoying another cup of coffee when my phone vibrated across the table. Ryan. I let it ring twice before answering. "Mom," he said immediately. "Where are you?" "I'm having breakfast." His voice sounded rushed. "The internet is barely working. Olivia has a video meeting in 15 minutes. She says everything keeps freezing. I changed the service." "You what?" "I downgraded the package." There was complete silence, then he laughed nervously. "Okay, that's funny. Now call them and switch it back." "I won't." His tone sharpened. "Mom, Olivia works from home." "I know. She needs fast internet. Then she can pay for it." Another long silence followed. Finally, he sighed. "Are you seriously doing all this because of yesterday?" "I'm doing this because yesterday reminded me what the last 3 years have looked like. It was just a joke." "No," I answered calmly. "A joke makes everyone laugh. That comment was meant to humiliate me." "You've always been too sensitive." I smiled sadly. "For years, I confused patience with permission. What does that even mean?" "It means I've allowed both of you to treat me like I don't matter." His breathing grew heavier. "Did you also cancel the grocery card?" "Yes. What are we supposed to eat? You both have full-time jobs." "Mom, you'll figure it out." Before he could continue arguing, I ended the call. My hands weren't shaking. My heart wasn't racing. I simply felt free. That afternoon, I drove back home. The driveway was empty. Ryan and Olivia were both at work. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The house looked exactly as I'd expected. Dirty dishes overflowed from the sink. Disposable cups covered the counters. Half-empty food trays still sat where guests had abandoned them Saturday evening. Apparently, the cleanup they expected me to handle had waited for my return. I walked past every mess without touching a single plate. Instead, I climbed the stairs. At the end of the hallway stood the master bedroom. The room Daniel and I had shared for nearly 30 years, the room I had surrendered because my son needed a fresh start. I slowly opened the door. Olivia's designer clothes filled the closets. Expensive perfume lingered in the air. Family photographs of Daniel had disappeared, replaced by abstract artwork Olivia preferred. For a long moment, I stood silently in the doorway. Memories flooded back. Daniel reading before bed, lazy Sunday mornings, planning retirement together. Every trace of those years had been erased, not by strangers, by people I had welcomed into my home. I turned around and walked downstairs to the storage room. Stacked neatly against one wall sat several unused moving boxes. I carried them upstairs one at a time. There was no anger, no shouting, no revenge. Only quiet determination. I carefully folded Olivia's dresses, Ryan's shirts, their shoes, their office equipment. Everything went into labeled boxes. Nothing was damaged. Nothing was thrown away. When each box was sealed, I carried it down the hallway and placed it inside the guest room, the same room I had occupied while they enjoyed the life I had sacrificed. Then I returned to the master bedroom. I opened my own storage boxes, one by one. I unpacked my clothes, my books, Daniel's framed photograph, the handmade quilt we'd bought on our anniversary. By late afternoon, the room finally felt like home again. I sat in Daniel's favorite chair beside the window with a cup of tea in my hands. Outside, I heard a car door slam. Then another. Ryan and Olivia had just come home. The front door opened with enough force to rattle the picture frames in the hallway. I remained seated in the master bedroom, calmly turning another page in my book. A few seconds later, Olivia's voice echoed through the house. "Margaret!" I didn't answer. Her heels clicked rapidly across the hardwood floor. Ryan followed behind her, his footsteps noticeably slower. "Margaret!" she shouted again. "Why is the internet still so slow?" Still, I said nothing. The bedroom door swung open. Olivia froze. Her eyes darted around the room. My floral quilt covered the king-sized bed. Daniel's photograph rested on the nightstand. My books lined the shelves again. The closet doors stood open, revealing my clothes neatly hanging inside. For several seconds, she couldn't speak. Ryan stepped around her and stared at the room in disbelief. "Mom," he whispered. "What happened?" I moved back into my bedroom. Olivia's face flushed bright red. "You moved our things." I packed them carefully. "Where are they?" "In the guest room." She folded her arms so tightly they almost trembled. "You had no right to touch our belongings." I closed my book and looked at her. I treated every item with respect. "I wish I could say the same about how you've treated me." Ryan rubbed his forehead. "Mom, this is a little extreme." "No." I stood slowly and faced both of them. Giving away my bedroom was generous. Pretending it belonged to someone else was my mistake. Olivia laughed bitterly. "So this is revenge because I made one comment." "This isn't revenge. It's control." "No," I replied evenly. "It's ownership." Her expression hardened. "We have a system in this house." I nodded. "You're right." Then I smiled politely. "And I've decided to change it." Ryan sighed. "Mom, we work full-time. We need the larger room. I worked full-time for 40 years while paying for this house." Neither of them answered. I continued. "The guest room has a bed, a closet, and a bathroom nearby. It will serve you just fine while you decide what comes next." Olivia stepped farther into the room. "You can't expect us to live in that tiny space." "I don't expect anything." She pointed toward the hallway. "My wardrobe doesn't even fit. That sounds like a problem you'll need to solve." Ryan looked exhausted already. "Mom, can we just sit down and talk?" "We're talking now." He glanced nervously at Olivia before speaking again. "You're overreacting." I looked directly into his eyes. "Tell me something." He frowned. "When your wife stopped me from eating a cupcake that I paid for, why didn't you defend me?" His mouth opened. Nothing came out. You laughed. It wasn't like that. Then tell me what it was like." He searched for an answer. None arrived. Olivia rolled her eyes. "Oh, please." It was obviously sarcasm. It didn't sound sarcastic. "You're 65 years old," she snapped. "You should have known I wasn't serious." "I did." She blinked. "I knew exactly how serious you were." The room fell silent. Finally, I walked toward the bedroom door. As of today, the master bedroom is no longer available. Ryan's shoulders slumped. "Where are we supposed to sleep tonight?" "The guest room." Olivia scoffed. "This is unbelievable." "No," I replied softly. "This is overdue." I walked downstairs, leaving them standing speechless. The following morning, I woke early and watered the flowers in the backyard. The sun had barely risen when Ryan joined me outside. He looked tired. His clothes were wrinkled, dark circles surrounded his eyes. "Can we talk?" I nodded toward the patio chairs. He sat heavily. "Olivia barely slept. I slept wonderfully." He managed a weak smile before becoming serious again. "She's looking at apartments. That's good. But they're expensive." I remained quiet. "We haven't saved enough for a deposit." I looked at him carefully. "You've lived here for 3 years without paying rent." "I know. I covered the utilities." "I know. I bought the groceries." "I know. So where did your money go?" He stared at the patio floor. "Car payments." I waited. "Student loans." I waited again. "Vacations." Finally, he sighed. "We thought we'd have more time. You had plenty." I reached into my apron pocket and unfolded a single sheet of paper. "I prepared something for you." He accepted it. Across the top, bold letters read, "Guest room agreement." His eyes widened as he continued reading. "Monthly rent. 1/200 half of utilities. Due monthly clean kitchen. After every meal respectful conduct required." He looked up slowly. "You're serious." "Very." He stared at the paper for another moment. "Olivia is never going to agree to this." "Then you have another option." He already knew the answer. "Move out?" I nodded once. "This house is my home, Ryan." He folded the paper carefully. "When is rent due?" I met his eyes without hesitation. "Friday." Friday arrived exactly as I expected. I walked into the kitchen just after 7 that morning. The countertops were cluttered with cereal bowls and coffee mugs. Olivia had left for work without rinsing a single dish. Ryan's travel mug sat beside the sink, still dripping coffee onto the counter. I looked around. No envelope, no check, no cash. The kitchen table remained empty. The rent agreement I'd handed Ryan 2 days earlier had been ignored. I quietly folded the paper napkin lying on the table and dropped it into the trash. Then I smiled. They had made their decision. When the house became quiet, I walked into the kitchen and opened every cabinet. Over the years, I had collected beautiful cookware, copper pots, professional-grade knives, a cast-iron Dutch oven Daniel had given me on our 25th anniversary, a powerful blender, a stand mixer, an espresso machine. Every piece had been purchased with my money. Olivia treated them as if they belonged to her. She also expected me to wash them after every meal. One by one, I wrapped each item in soft towels and placed them into storage boxes. Nothing was damaged. Nothing was hidden permanently. I was simply reclaiming what belonged to me. When I finished, I carried every box into the locked basement storage room. Only one inexpensive frying pan, a small saucepan, a plastic spatula, and a basic coffee maker remained in the kitchen. More than enough for anyone paying nothing to live there. That evening, I was reading on the back porch when I heard the front door open. A few moments later, Olivia's voice echoed through the house. "Ryan." Cabinets slammed, Thrakers opened and closed. Footsteps pounded across the floor. Finally, she stormed onto the patio carrying a package of fresh steaks. "Margaret." I calmly looked up from my book. "Yes, where are my pans?" "They're not yours." Her jaw tightened. "You know exactly what I mean." "I do." She held the package higher. "I planned dinner. You still can." "With what?" I pointed toward the kitchen, the frying pan. She stared at me in disbelief. "You expect me to cook ribeye steaks in that cheap thing? It cooks food." She laughed sarcastically. "This is ridiculous." "No." I closed my book. "What's ridiculous is believing you were entitled to everything I own while contributing almost nothing." Ryan stepped onto the porch, already looking defeated. "Mom." I raised one hand gently. "Did you bring the rent?" He hesitated. "No, then the premium cookware stays packed." Olivia threw her hands into the air. "You are unbelievable." "I've heard that before." She glared at me. "You're punishing us. I'm establishing boundaries. This isn't how families behave." I nodded slowly. "You're right." For a brief moment, hope crossed Ryan's face. Then I continued. "Families also don't tell the woman paying every bill that she's not successful enough to eat dessert." Neither of them spoke. The silence lingered for several seconds. Finally, Olivia spun around. "Forget this!" She marched back inside. Ryan remained standing on the porch. He looked embarrassed. "I wish things hadn't gotten this far. So do I." He lowered his eyes. But they did. Over the next 10 days, life inside the house changed dramatically. The grocery credit card remained canceled. The internet crawled at its slowest speed. Streaming services disappeared one by one. Every evening, Ryan and Olivia argued. Sometimes quietly. Sometimes loud enough for me to hear through the walls. They blamed each other for bills they had never expected to pay. Apartment listings covered their dining table. Security deposits. Monthly rent UD estimates. Parking fees. Reality had finally arrived. One Saturday morning, I looked out the front window and saw a moving truck parked in my driveway. Ryan carried boxes toward the truck while Olivia loaded clothes into the back seat of her car. Neither smiled. Their new apartment was less than half the size of my home and cost more each month than they had ever imagined. I walked onto the front porch carrying a glass of iced tea. Ryan noticed me first. He stopped beside the truck. "Are you happy now?" he asked quietly. I looked at him with genuine sadness. "I never wanted this. It feels like you did." I shook my head. "I didn't force you to leave. You made staying impossible." "No." I held his gaze. "I made staying require responsibility." He looked away. For the first time since all this began, he had no argument. Only regret. Olivia slammed the truck door. "We're done here," she called sharply. Ryan nodded. "We'll come back next week for the things still in the basement." I set my glass on the porch railing. "No." He frowned. "What do you mean?" "Anything left after today will be donated on Monday." He knew I wasn't bluffing. Without another word, he walked back toward the truck. Half an hour later, both vehicles pulled away. I watched until they disappeared around the corner. The driveway became completely still. Then I walked inside. Waiting in the hallway was the new deadbolt lock I'd purchased several days earlier. I picked up a screwdriver and knelt beside the front door. 15 minutes later, the old lock rested in my hand. The new one clicked smoothly into place. I tested it twice. Perfect. For the first time in 3 years, no one else had a key to my home. A month passed before I heard Ryan's car pull into my driveway again. Life inside my house had changed in ways I hadn't expected. The silence no longer felt lonely. It felt peaceful. Fresh flowers sat on the dining table every week. My late husband, Daniel's leather recliner, was back in its familiar corner beside the fireplace. The garage had become my gardening workshop again, filled with potted herbs instead of exercise equipment. Most importantly, I no longer felt like a guest in my own home. That Tuesday afternoon, I was trimming roses near the front porch when I noticed Ryan climbing slowly out of his car. He was alone. His shoulders sagged beneath the weight of responsibilities he had never carried before. His neatly pressed business shirts had been replaced by a wrinkled polo. Dark circles framed his tired eyes. He looked older than 34. I set my gardening gloves on the porch railing. "Hello, Ryan." He offered a weak smile. "Hi, Mom." For several awkward seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, I motioned toward the patio. "Would you like some iced tea?" He nodded quietly. We sat across from each other beneath the shade of the old maple tree. The same place where Daniel and I used to drink coffee every Saturday morning. Ryan wrapped both hands around the cold glass before speaking. "The apartment isn't what we expected." I listened without interrupting. "The rent is almost double what we thought." He stared into his drink. "The utility bills keep coming." I remained silent. "The water pressure barely works." Another pause. We argued over a $60 grocery bill yesterday. His voice cracked slightly. I never realized how expensive ordinary life could be. I looked at my son with compassion, not satisfaction, not anger, simply compassion. "When someone else pays your bills," I said gently, "it's easy to mistake comfort for independence." He slowly nodded. "You're right." The admission surprised me. He looked around the backyard. "The garden looks beautiful. I finally have time to enjoy it." He smiled faintly. "I miss living here." I met his eyes. "No." He frowned. "You miss not paying for anything." The words weren't cruel. They were simply true. He lowered his head. After a long silence, he whispered, "I guess I do." For the first time since this ordeal began, he wasn't making excuses. He wasn't blaming Olivia. He wasn't asking me to fix his problems. He was finally being honest. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I should have stood up for you that day." I believed he meant it. "I know. I didn't realize how much we'd taken for granted. You weren't children anymore. We acted like we were." Another silence settled between us. This one felt lighter, healthier. Ryan looked toward the kitchen window where fresh curtains fluttered gently in the breeze. "Olivia still thinks you overreacted." I nodded. "That's her decision. She's still angry. I'm not." He looked surprised. "You're not?" I smiled softly. "No. Haven't you been angry this whole time?" I was disappointed. I picked up my glass. But disappointment fades once you stop allowing people to hurt you. He leaned back in his chair. "I don't know if our relationship will ever be the same." "It won't." His face fell. "But that doesn't mean it can't become better." He looked at me hopefully. "What does that take?" "Respect." He nodded. "And responsibility." Again he nodded. Neither of us mentioned moving back. Neither of us mentioned money. Some doors close for a reason. This one needed to stay closed. I stood and walked into the kitchen. When I returned, I carried a small white bakery box. Ryan recognized it immediately. His eyes widened. "Those are vanilla cupcakes." I opened the lid. Inside rested 2 perfectly frosted cupcakes. They looked almost identical to the ones served at Olivia's promotion party. I peeled the wrapper from one cupcake and took a slow bite. The sweet vanilla frosting melted perfectly. Ryan watched quietly. After swallowing, I smiled. "You know," he waited. "Olivia was right about one thing." His eyebrows lifted. "These really are for successful people." His expression filled with embarrassment. I continued before he could apologize again. "Success isn't measured by promotions." I placed the second cupcake back inside the box. "It isn't measured by expensive clothes, luxury vacations, or pretending you're better than someone else." He listened carefully. "Success is earning what you have. It's respecting the people who helped you. It's protecting your peace instead of sacrificing it to keep everyone else comfortable." I gently slid the bakery box across the table. "The second cupcake is yours." He looked at it but didn't reach for it. "I don't think I've earned it yet." I smiled warmly. "Maybe not." Then I stood and picked up my watering can. "But now you finally know how to." Without another word, I walked toward my garden, leaving Ryan alone beneath the maple tree. When I glanced back a few minutes later, he was still sitting quietly, staring at the unopened cupcake. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying his burdens anymore. I was simply enjoying the life and the home I had worked so hard to build.